Hello, my name is Susanne Evans and welcome to the ChangeStories podcast. This is a podcast for people who are interested in creating change, whether that is within organisations or for individuals. In each podcast episode, I will have a conversation with someone about their work to share their story. Each story and conversation will provide you with ideas and inspiration for your own organisation or for you personally. To find out more about each episode, including further reading, and to share your change stories, go to www.changestories.co.uk. Hello and welcome to the Change Stories podcast. My guest today is Andrew Saffron, who is the author of this brilliant book, Better Culture, Faster. For listeners, I'm waving it at the screen. Andrew is one of the world's leading culture change practitioners whose high challenge but engaging style has won him acclaim and awards. He's worked with many global organisations, government departments and not-for-profits to rapidly change their cultures. Andrew, it's so great to see you. Thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm very excited to talk to you about your book. I've been reading it, very much enjoying it. It speaks to me on lots of different levels. So I'm looking forward to delving into the detail with you. But I just wanted to ask you, what was the moment when you decided you wanted to write it?
I had a quiet week and I thought, that book you've meant to write for years, let's just sit down and get cracking. And the reason I wanted to write it was because, frankly, there's just a lot of nonsense written and spoken about culture change. And without wanting to harp my own trumpet too hard, I know how to do it. And I thought, if I'd write a book that's effectively an instruction manual, everybody could do it. So I did think I had it done in 10 days, and then I sent it to my editor, and it needed work.
Well, I think, yes, that's why they're there, to show you that it isn't. I'm amazed, actually, because my book writing process was a lot more torturous and went on for a very long time. But it was kind of long periods of inactivity followed by short periods of intense activity was kind of how it went for me.
Right. Yeah, I recognise that as well. Yeah.
There's a lot of procrastinating and writer's block with Alison just saying, Susanne, you just need to write something. Just write something,
I'm afraid my terrible, if there's something on my to-do list, I've got to get it finished tendencies just kicked in. So I just couldn't stop, just had to keep going. And frankly, It's stuff I've been saying for years and years and years, so it just kind of fell out almost.
And I like the fact that, it had been on your list for a long time. I'm guessing it's the sort of things that people often ask you about, and you've put that into book form.
Yeah, exactly. It's the stuff people ask about and the stuff that people get wrong.
Yes.
And it's a giant waste of time and giant waste of money, as well as organisations launch a culture change programme to great fanfare. They raise expectations, don't deliver, and expectations are crushed. And I always think it leaves people worse off than they were before because you've raised the expectation.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's one of the things I really like about the book is that it focuses really sharply on that, so let's do things quickly. This doesn't need to be something that takes forever. It doesn't need to be full of jargon. It doesn't need to be a quick fix. There's a way of doing this that isn't hugely painful, and I think that's really refreshing because so much you see and read about culture change is it's really hard and it's really difficult and takes a long time, and I love the fact that you just blow straight through all of that.
Well, it can't take a long time. The received wisdom is that it takes years to change culture, and yes, there is a direct relationship between the size of the organisation and how long it takes, but most of my clients don't have years. Either they're struggling and they've got to turn the ship around, or they want to really get ahead of their competitors, in which case they've got to move fast because their competitors will, or they've got to pivot dramatically and they don't have time. So whatever the scenario, if you say to them, well, it's going to take 3 to 5 years to change our culture, they're going to say, well, let's not bother then, because we ain't got 3 to 5 years.
So I'm interested as to where you think this sort of perceived wisdom about culture change has come from, because we work. There's a Venn diagram of our work, I think, isn't there, that sort of crosses over each other.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's that piece around, 70% of organisation change fails, which is what I butt up against all the time, which is nonsense.
Yeah.
We all know it's nonsense, but it keeps being talked about. That has come from a place of consultancies trying to tell everyone how hard it is what they do. Do you think the culture change being difficult has come from that sort of space as well?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I've not been asked that before. Almost certainly. I have a big consultancy background many years ago. And that sort of land and expand mentality probably infiltrates its way into the methodology. But I think mostly it's probably that we've just upgraded our thinking about how to do this. And hence, and as I bang on about in the book, as well as in real life, sticking posters on the walls with your values on it isn't culture change. That's not how you do it. But that's where the thinking started. And I think the earliest writing I've come across around culture change is in the 1960s. And organizations were very different then. And the people that worked in them were very different then. So we've had to upgrade our thinking.
Yeah, it did actually. I mean, there were lots of moments in your book that really made me laugh. I think it's a very funny book, which is one of the reasons I enjoyed it. But yes, the idea of posters, let's have some cupcakes, let's put up a balloon arch, it's like, no, none of that works. It's just pointless and silly.
No more cupcakes out of context.
Absolutely. So if your approach is very much around, let's do some diagnosis, let's understand what the issue is, let's try and solve some of the problems. There'll be listeners to this podcast who are not experts in culture change and don't know how to do it. Yeah. How can you distill your approach for people who are new to this as a concept? What would be the key learnings from your book that you'd want to share?
Okay, let me see if I can do this in less than 60 seconds.
You can have longer if it makes it easier.
63. Well, it starts with defining the culture that you need. And that word need is absolutely vital. The only reason to talk about culture change is to determine whether the culture that you've got is either going to help you to achieve your strategic goals or get in the way. If your existing culture is siloed, hierarchical, bureaucratic, but you're going after significantly greater market share, or your competitors are stealing your market share, being slow, being siloed, being bureaucratic is going to get in your way. So it starts with defining the culture that you need. And then after that, it's about making sure that everyone understands this is a strategic imperative. So you tell people what the cultural expectations are. You help them to be able to live that. You make sure that there's an enabling infrastructure to support them. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you say to people, we want you to be more empowered, people can't be more empowered when processes, policies, procedures absolutely prevent them from being empowered. And then finally, I'm at my 60 seconds, the silver bullet is that you've got to apply consequences. These are the expectations. If you reach or exceed those expectations, good things will happen to you: career progression, pay rises, bonuses, etc. If you don't achieve them, then either fewer good things or even bad things will happen. If you're in a senior position and you've got, through the pyramid, thousands of people working for you, and you are not living up to those standards, you are potentially blocking 1,000 people from performing. So we're going to have to take action. I could bang on about that at greater length, but I'll pause there.
I think that final point is so important, and I've seen it in lots of organisations where there's some truly awful behaviours, but nothing seems to be done about it. There could be a policy about bullying and harassment in the workplace, and everyone talks about it and the leaders say how important it is, and then you go into a meeting and you observe some truly terrible behaviour and there's no action taken, and it undermines absolutely everything. Yeah. I think it's something organisations find really difficult, and I think part of it is lack of leadership and lack of people being prepared to make those difficult decisions. Is that your experience as well?
Totally. Lack of leadership and poor HR policies.
Yes.
Processes. So the number of times that I've sat with an executive team at the beginning of a culture change program and said to them, if I were to lock the door and give you all a piece of paper and a pencil and ask you to write down the names of the long-term underperformers, could you do it? And they always say yes.
Yeah.
Wow. And I always say, look, I've been knocking around your organisation for 2 weeks and I know their names.
Yes.
Wow. So I talk to them about applying positive and negative consequences, and they nod along and say, yeah, of course, intuitively, that sounds absolutely right. And then we start the program and we make sure the expectations are clear and make sure people can live them. They're supported and developed to be able to live them. And then the moment comes to make those decisions about positive and negative consequences, and the exec team gets a bit queasy. They find it very difficult. And I don't think it's a hard decision, because in my experience, whenever one of those long-term underperformers is actually exited, the fear of the exec team is that the rest of the organization is going to go, oh God, what if it's me next? That's not what happens. They put the bunting out and have a party.
Yes.
Because Big Bob, who's been blocking them for years, is now gone and they're liberated. It's just good news for everybody.
Well, and I think that's an interesting point, because the leadership know who these people are, but so does everyone else. And so
Exactly.
it's like this awful anchor that keeps you in place. And you also have to think about why that person is the way that they are. You know, it can't be very satisfying for them either. So maybe the reason that they blocking things is because they're unhappy in their role. So, you know, there's good reasons all round for doing it, but I think it so often gets in the way of creating change, this unwillingness to grasp some of those really thorny issues.
Oh, exactly. It does need courage.
Yes.
Courage to make those kind of decisions, but also courage as a leader to take a look at yourself and say, actually, I'm falling short here and I'm going to do something about it. I think that's wonderful. I mean, any leader at the beginning of a program who says, well, thank goodness for that, I'm okay, has probably got it wrong.
Yes.
And in fact, I always say at the beginning of a program, one of the biggest obstacles to the to behavioral change is that we tend to think that we're okay and it's other people who are the problem. And when I say that to groups, I say to them, and even though I've just said that, a number of you around the table will be thinking in your heads, that sounds like it's true, but in my case, I am okay. And it is other people who are the problem. And they will kind of, yeah, you're right. I was thinking that. So unless you can get past that, nothing's going to shift.
It is that mindset shift, isn't it, of the leadership and others as well, that we're all part of the problem. We all have a responsibility to play in creating this change.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think all of us have a responsibility at work to make sure that we are showing up every day as the best possible versions of ourselves. I say every day, we're human beings. We're going to have bumpy moments. Of course we are. But I'm just a big believer in personal growth throughout life, not just at work.
I agree. And going back to one of the earlier points you were making about how you define what success looks like, and this isn't about posters and banners and all that sort of thing. It's about helping people understand it. That's challenging in big organisations, isn't it? Because you'll find different teams have their own little culture. How does that work if you've got lots of little mini cultures within one big culture?
Yeah, well, my methodology says you should allow for localization of the culture. What that means is there is an umbrella culture that everyone has to adhere to and live underneath. But the sales team, for example, is going to live that culture in a different way to the manufacturing part of the business. What they do is totally different. So we should give them the opportunity to localize. I describe it as same language, different accent.
Yeah.
I think that's good, but what you can't do is allow them to be a separate enclave, all on their own. Yeah, we're just different and special. We don't have to operate that way. It doesn't work.
Yes. No, and there's lots of organisations where that happens, isn't there? Oh well, it'd be all right if it wasn't for them. They're all
Oh yeah,
different and weird. We're fine.
yeah.
It's
Oh, exactly. I think pretty much every organisation that I've ever worked with, when you ask them to describe the negative features of their existing culture, they will use the word siloed.
yes, yes,
That it comes up every time. So if we're doing things that reinforce the silo mentality, then we're getting it seriously wrong. Our job is to break that down.
and I'm interested as well in how you get to some of those things that are hidden. And I'll give an example to illustrate what I mean. So I worked with an organisation a few years ago. And I sat down with their leadership team and they were saying, it's brilliant, we've got really long service, people love working here, it's a very honest culture. And then someone said to me, there's no politics in this organisation. And I was like,
Really?
I can see you twitching as I'm saying it.
Yeah.
And I was like, really? No, nothing. And I was like, that's interesting. So then and they all said the same, the leadership team, no, everyone plays with a straight bat, etc., etc. Fine. So then I started going further down the organisation. And of course, inevitably, there were lots of politics, but it was done in quite a subtle way. So that if you went to a meeting and you said something that people didn't agree with, you'd never be invited back to that meeting. And I mean, it would just disappear out of your diary. Nothing was ever said to you. It was quite bizarre.
Right.
And but it was very hidden and no one talked about it. And it wasn't until I started coming along and asking questions that it suddenly started to be surfaced. Is that something that you've come across as well? These things that are very, very hidden about the organisation?
Yes. And I think part of my way into that is I try to be on site, try and live on site, because you end up experiencing it and feeling it and seeing it. Also, part of being on site is that you start to build the kind of relationships where people are more willing to talk to you. But more than that, I talk a lot about the importance of candor. Unless we're willing to say what's really going on, we can't fix it. And that is a struggle in a lot of organizations. And the less candor there is, the more that tells you the story of what's really going on there. It's different in different parts of the world. Clients in Asia Pacific region, it's not part of their national culture to speak truth to power. So you have to find different strategies to get them to open up. But in Western countries, there's something going on if people aren't being straight. Plus, a lot of people are just conflict avoidant and don't want to say it. But put them in the right setting, ask the right questions, it comes out. It just does. They can't help themselves. But if you go in there as the suited and booted consultant with flip chart and a felt tip pen, saying, right, tell me what's rubbish about this place, they're not going to tell you. Build the relationships, build the rapport, tell the stories, start to win them over, and yeah, they want to talk about it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's definitely how I prefer to work, is just wandering around asking questions and finding stuff out.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that bit of the job. I love the building relationships thing. As long as they're, genuine relationships, it's not fake, but you genuinely are interested in people. As long as you walk around non-judgmentally, so this is just a thing and people are just like this. Why are people like this? I'm not going to judge them for it. If you're able to do that, then you're going to get insights flooding at you. And by the way, a thought popped into my head as you were speaking earlier about how do you define the culture that you need. One of my pet peeves is culture surveys. And I dislike surveys, quantitative surveys anyway, because they presuppose what the issues are. I always liken it to the hotel bedroom where you get the little feedback card. Well, it's a QR code these days, isn't it? But you used to get a card that says, how clean was your room? 5. What was the quality of the food like? 5. And it looks like you absolutely love this hotel, but actually what you want to tell them about is that the water pressure in the shower was awful. It's not asking me about the thing I want to talk about. It's the same in culture surveys. So my method of eliciting what the current culture is and the target culture that we need is to sit people in a room and have a conversation.
Yeah.
And the more times you do that, the more you start to hear the commonalities in people's experiences. And after a while of doing, after doing a number of those, you're not hearing anything new, but it's still a wonderful exercise to start to engage people and get people excited about what might be coming. So no surveys.
I'm with you on that one, and I'm definitely in with you in terms of going places and visiting. I guess it's harder, or has been harder in the past few years because of not being able to do that so much. And you can do it, we're talking over Teams today. You can still do it, but it isn't quite the same as being in a room with people, I don't think.
No, I describe it as being twice as hard and half as good.
Yes.
So it's an option, but it's not great.
No, I did in 2021, I did a restructuring project for a client, and it was a small team. No one was being made redundant. It was sort of a changing of roles and then moving people around. So it should have been pretty easy. But because we couldn't meet up with anybody, we had to do it all over Zoom. And it took twice as long because you don't know. You do a big meeting and tell people what was happening, and you'd have no idea. Did people understand? Did they like it? Were they upset because they'd have their cameras off, or there'd just be too many people? So it took twice as long to do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's easy to hide if it's a large group. It's more difficult to speak up. You can't read the room. You can't change direction easily because you've got to kind of fit with a format. So yeah, much rather do it in person.
And I think going back to what you said earlier about sitting down with people and just having a conversation, I think fundamentally people know how they want, actually know what they need the culture to be. Let's use the right term. So it's not what they want, it's what they need.
Yeah.
People know that. The leaders of an organisation know that, but perhaps they don't have the capacity to sit and have that conversation, or they don't know what questions to ask. And I really like your approach about, let's just get a sheet of paper and let's do positive and negative things and let's just write all that down, because everyone knows that.
They do. And then I know the bit of the book you're referring to, so that's my alternative to the surveys. List the positives, list the negatives. And then when I ask them, what's the impact of the negative features of the culture? And they say, it slows us down, it costs us money, it creates duplication of effort. You see the light bulbs going on when they realize, culture isn't one of those soft, fluffy things. Actually, it's seriously getting in our way. And our strategy is to move at pace, beat our competitors, get more products into the market. We're never going to do that whilst we're moving slowly and hemorrhaging money.
Yes, and I think it's really good to have that made clear to people, because I do think there is a perception even now that some of this stuff around culture and around change is a bit fluffy, and it's not the hard nuts and bolts of business. But this is, this will make a difference to organisations' bottom line if you get this right.
Well, exactly, and one of the other traps I see a lot of organisations fall into, and I mean a lot, is give it to HR to do. They'll do culture change because they do people. Yes. And in my, I was going to say humble, not so humble opinion, you've lost before you've started. Not because HR are no good, but because if you give it to a group of people who by definition support the business, a support function, as opposed to operationally drive the business, you've told people it's peripheral. It's not really fundamental to what we do. So culture change has to be led by the exec team. Absolutely has to be. HR hopefully can provide some specialist skills to support the culture change efforts, but it's got to be seen as an exec team operational activity. Absolutely. And I think in defence of HR, they probably have plenty of other things to be doing as well as doing this. So I think it's, giving it to someone on top of the day job means it isn't being given the focus that it deserves as an activity. Well, exactly. And, some of the things they should be doing, I talked earlier about making sure you've got the right HR processes to apply positive and negative consequences. That means, does your performance management system actually measure people's behavioral performance? And I don't mean the bit on the annual appraisal that has a general kind of open box that says, have you lived the values? No, I'm talking about a robust method to measure people's behavioral performance as well as their delivery against objectives. Do we have a robust disciplinary process? Do we have a robust performance management, performance improvement process? Do we have a robust grievance process? Also, all the way around the employee life cycle, are we reinforcing the culture we need? Are we recruiting people in line with the culture we need? Are we onboarding them in line with it? Are we developing them in line with it? Are we talent managing? They've got a lot to do.
Absolutely. And it's that golden thread, isn't it, that goes from the top to the bottom. So you set the strategy, you set the culture that you want, but then everything else needs to drive in that direction. Otherwise, it's never going to work.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. And everything should enable and reinforce it.
Exactly.
Other elements. Yeah.
I did a project years ago for Sky, and we're talking 25 years ago, and it was customer service in their contact centres up in Scotland, and we did a whole load of work on that. And then it became clear that there was a whole group of people that no one had really thought about, which was the engineers who go out and do the fitting of things, because they're the people who are actually in people's houses and are the face of the organisation to the customer. So it kind of expanded then to be that group of people as well, because it isn't, if you're ringing the call centre, that's fine, and they do need to be customer focused, but so does everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember working with an aerospace organisation some years ago that fundamentally shifted the way that they operated when they realised that their customer wasn't the Air Force or the government or whatever that was buying their aircraft, their fighter aircraft. It was the person flying in the cockpit. That means a very, very different way of thinking. And it was a beautiful thing to witness as they started to unravel the way they did things to truly focus on the true customer.
It's always fun when you see a load of light bulbs going off in a room, isn't it, when you're facilitating those conversations?
Yeah, exactly. Although very annoying when it's somebody else who puts the really good idea on the table. Damn, I should have thought of that.
Shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to go back to your second point about, you've defined what you need, and now you need to try and get people engaged and excited in this. Yeah. How do organisations go about that? What advice would you give to listeners of this podcast about engaging and exciting people in this process?
Yeah. Well, how do organisations go about this? Well, it's the cupcakes and the posters usually. Wrong.
Yes, on every level.
How do you do it? Well, so my approach is that you have to drive culture change from the top down, from the bottom up, and from the middle out. That's how you reach the fingers and toes of the whole organisation. I've witnessed lots of organisations that start at the top and then presumably hope that through some kind of magic, it's going to trickle its way through the organisation. And it never, ever, 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 ever does. Partly because the messaging just becomes so dilute as it starts to go through the organisation that it becomes meaningless. But also, at or about, let's call it middle management level, you'll hit a blockage. And I think over the years, we've been really unkind about this middle management population. We've called them the permafrost layer. Yeah. And I think it's unkind because it's missing the point. It will hit a blockage when it gets to them, not because they're bloody minded and obstinate, but because they don't know what it's all about. They haven't been engaged. No one's told them why we're doing this. No one's told them what the expectation is. No one's told them what they'd like them to put in place. No one's given them the tools and skills to be able to do it. And they sit there thinking, well, if I just stick my head in the sand or look the other way, this will just kind of go away like all other corporate initiatives tend to do anyway. So you have to engage them. But also, there's no point hoping that they can engage the people that sit underneath them, because you're hoping that they can suddenly deploy a skill set that they've never needed before, and therefore don't have. So you drive culture change top down, middle out, bottom up. And the phrase that I use as I go through this, how do you excite people about, to answer your question, how do you excite people? I use the phrase, how can we help people to embody, role model, and embed the culture? And some of the excitement comes from, oh my God, we're actually going to get rid of all the irritating impediments to performance that I've been talking about for years. And, oh my God, I can do some stuff that I didn't feel I had the level of authority to do before. I can actually perform in a more empowered way. So the excitement doesn't come from the fanfare and banners. The excitement comes from liberating people to do what they know needs to be done and allowing them to produce their best performance every day.
I 100% agree with that. It's that seeing that this time is different. You know, if you've had a whole load of programs before, which, let's face it, most organisations have, where it was all lovely at the time and then nothing happened. I think when you do something different and immediately people see something change for the better, that's when you get that excitement, that this feels different to last time we did it.
Yeah. Well, there's a nice little trick here, I think, which is that what I always like to do is to fix the known issues before you even start to engage people. Because they won't engage when they know that's broken, and that's broken. And everybody knows it. So let's just hit those things. Let's get them fixed. Then when you go out to engage people in culture change, you can say, look, we are serious about it because we fixed that, and that. And they might not have even noticed. But you can say to them, we fixed that, and that. And they go, oh, yeah. Yeah, we have. Okay, I'm listening. Why would you try and put a car on the road when there's no air in the tyres?
Yeah, exactly. It's that I talk a lot about the you said we did in supermarkets. You know, you have the board. You said the trolleys have all got wobbly wheels. We got some new trolleys. It's doing that sort of thing very early on. And I like your idea of doing it even before you go out there to talk to people, so that they're starting to experience this new world straight away.
Well, I'll give you an example. It was a retail organisation, I won't name them, some years ago that were embarking on a massive transformation programme. And I remember saying to them, I don't think you should start yet. I think you should start by fixing the problem that most of your retail staff talk about, which is that most of your retail outlets don't have staff toilets. This was such a problem that they were having to go to pubs and restaurants to try and borrow toilets. They were having to try and manage their fluid intake during the day. That you've got to fix that. It's almost treating people contemptuously to not fix that. And how are you going to engage people in something that's going to require more effort when you're treating them contemptuously? No, just no. So they did. They fixed it. Brilliant. And it's amazing how quickly you can do it when you really want to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the frustration sometimes with some of these long-running issues in organisations, that once the decision is made to fix it, it's really quick, and then you wonder why it's taken so long to get to that.
Well, exactly, and that brings up, you know, what I think is actually often the biggest impediment to culture change, which is that the old culture gets in the way of the introduction of the new culture. You know, in the new culture, you've got to move at speed, for example. But the old culture is, well, the committee doesn't meet for another 6 weeks. So we can't make a decision. And that committee tends to crawl all over the details. So they'll probably bump your paper back and say, no, we need more detail around this. No, you're going to move at speed. Probably you need to start operating on a 70% basis, meaning we're 70% comfortable with this, 70% comfortable with the risk, let's just go. Old culture gets in the way of the introduction of the new culture if you let it.
One of the things that I say most often on the change programs I work on is success, not perfection. So, you know, let's just be successful rather than trying to get everything right, because I mean, you'll have seen this too. oh, we can't communicate anything about that because we haven't quite got the messages all sorted yet, so we just won't say anything. No, say something. And it, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's fine. People will understand.
Yeah, I like that phrase, success, not perfection. I'm going
I
to
didn't make it
plagiarise
up,
that.
by the way. I didn't
You
make
didn't?
it up. No.
Oh, in that case, I'm not plagiarising.
No, you may use it.
Thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, I think that's right. And I always say, no decision is still a decision. You're
Yes.
still telling people we're not doing anything.
Yeah.
So you pay the price for that.
I worked with a client recently, an HR director, and he said he was very well known for just making decisions very quickly. And he said, Susanne, I would rather make 100 decisions and 10 of them are wrong than make no decisions at all. And
Lovely.
that was his thing, and so I loved meetings with him because he'd just go, yeah, no, yeah, done, off we go. And that's how he worked. And he got stuff wrong, but he owned it and dealt with it. And I think
exactly.
it was that kind of pace, that moving forward, that in this particular organisation had really been lacking.
Yeah, I really like that. And, there'll be some decisions that you go, actually, I can't just take an educated punt on this. But that's fine. Those are the exceptions. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think, going back to what we were saying about mindset shift in leaders to create change, I do think that gets in their way. This idea that they've got to be right all the time, they've got to be perfect, they've got to have all the answers. And I see it in my work all the time. It stops leaders from moving forward because they're so afraid of getting things wrong.
Oh, totally. And that starts right from the top, and that might go beyond the CEO. So often my work takes me into working with the board.
Yes.
You are not enabling, you are not supporting. This is how you need to operate differently. And that's usually the hardest bit of my work, because they're so institutionalized in this is the way that boards work. We start by reading out loud the minutes from the last meeting. Really?
Must we?
Yeah, must we. In fact, one of my measures of success of my work with boards is the reduction in height of the board papers. So the board papers are usually about that high. If I can get it to about that high, because there are much better quality papers,
Yes.
Meaning the purpose of writing the paper is to help the board to make a high quality decision. That is not going to help do that. Doing that might,
Yes.
as long as you write it properly, but you've got to get the board comfortable with that rather than that. There's some comfort for them in the height of the pile.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think back to my days in Big Four consulting, and we used to do pitches and proposals, and it was kind of the weight of the tome that we presented was seen as a good thing. And when I went out on my own, I swore I would never create that. And if I could get it all onto a page, I would.
Well, exactly. And it's really interesting. If you talk to the people on the receiving end of our pitches and proposals and say to them, what do you actually read in the proposal? And they'll say, probably, I don't read that page where you've summarized back to me what I've already told you, which seems to be a standard element of consultants' proposals. The first thing I do is look at the costs page.
Yeah.
And then I'll have a kind of speed read through your approach and methodology. And there might be a bit of that I'm quite interested in. So then if you say, okay, what's the perfect proposal as far as you're concerned? They'll tell you, if you can summarize on a page what you're going to do that makes me really excited and the price is right and I like the look of the people you're putting forward, done.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm wittering a bit now, but I think if you get that right, I think it stands you in good stead when you're compared to another consultancy whose price is lower. So that they'll actually have the conversation around price with you. Perhaps not so much in the public sector. But.
Yeah, oh yeah, but actually this applies internally too, doesn't it? So when we're trying to communicate something new to our employees, the temptation to come up with some massively complex thing is huge. But you've got to keep it simple, and remembering as well that they haven't been engaged in all of this like you have. So you could have been working on this for 6 months or a year before you tell anyone.
Yes.
And just keep it simple. People don't need all of the guff.
Oh, yeah, they won't read it.
No.
I always say to my team, if you're sending any kind of if you're sending an email of any nature to a client, whether it's a big comms thing or can we have a meeting about, if they have to scroll, your email's too long. You actually want people to pay attention. It's got to be short and pithy. That's it. And yeah, if there's an attachment, stick it. If it needed, then do that. But make the call to action really clear.
Yes, with comms around change, create a space for people who need all the detail, but direct them to that space. Don't give that to everybody. They don't all need it.
Precisely, exactly that. And as a good friend of mine always says, at the point at which you've got bored of saying something, that's probably the point that people have started listening.
Ah,
that's quite nice, isn't it?
I like that.
Yeah. And your first response to that is, "Oh, surely not." But then, with all the organisational noise going on, yeah, that sounds right. People getting 80 to 100 emails a day, plus we've now got Teams messages and WhatsApp groups,
Slack channels, and everything else.
Exactly, everyone's just bombarded.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's true. I a change project I've just finished. One of the change people said to me, "But we've told them this about 8 times." I went, "Yeah, but they clearly haven't internalized it yet because they're still asking the same question." There's 2 reasons for that. One is they don't know the answer. 2 is they do know the answer and they don't like it, and they're just going to keep asking until you tell them the answer. Well, both of those scenarios, you need to keep telling them this information.
Yeah, and that speaks to an element of project mentality that you've got to avoid, which is you can be working on something so intensely and you've interrogated every detail, and then it's really easy to get judgy of the people on the outside. It's a bit of feedback that says we've said this 8 times and people aren't listening has got to make you point the finger at yourself, not them.
Yes, exactly. You're saying it in a way that people don't understand, or that they haven't heard, or they don't understand, both of which that's interesting feedback, isn't it?
Or you wrote it in a way that means that they're just not interested.
Yes.
Just don't care. Yeah.
Exactly. We've almost run out of time, which I can't believe. It's been a very, very fun conversation. But I just wanted to go back to the humour in the book. So it is very funny, and it starts right at the beginning with your dedication of the book to lots of famous people, which I loved, which really made me laugh. Do you use humour in your work? Is that something that's important to you?
Yeah, I do. I just firmly believe that people learn more and engage more if they're enjoying themselves. And I don't mean, wear a clown nose and do a dance. I mean, talk to people like grown-ups. They will behave like grown-ups and they'll give you grown-up feedback. That's why this, you haven't said it for reasons I understand, but the subtitle of my book is sweary, and there are swear words in my books. And when I'm with clients, I will swear tactically. Mm-hmm. Because it says, look, I'm human. I'm not the suited and booted consultant. I want to actually engage with you. And when I'm doing the storytelling, if there's humor in the story, it just grabs people's attention. So I wanted the book to be funny because people might actually read it then. I've never read a business book from cover to cover, which is not necessarily about the books and more about me. But what if I could write it in a way that made people feel like they're actually enjoying it as they go? So yeah, lover of the comedy. Just come back from the Edinburgh Festival as well. So that always gives me ideas.
I think it's very refreshing because a lot of business books are really boring and they also take themselves way too seriously. So I think it's good, and I subscribe to that notion of just being a human being and treating people I work with as human beings and as grown-ups and having those honest conversations. And I think there's a big difference between not being serious and not taking yourself seriously. And I think, I don't take myself particularly seriously, but I can be serious because sometimes you have to have serious conversations. But you've got to, it's got to be fun at the end of the day when you're working with people on these things.
Yeah, you've got to manage yourself. I mean, if I go and sit down with the CEO and say, right, I think those 4 people need to be exited, that's a serious conversation.
It is.
There is no place for humour there. But if you've got a workshop of 40 people, if they're laughing, they're probably engaged. But as you say, the fun is an instrument to taking things seriously.
Yes.
So it's not just fluff. It just enables people to engage in that way. In fact, there's a line on my website that says, we take our work and our clients seriously. We try not to take ourselves quite so seriously.
It's so important. I think there's a lot of consultants out there doing this stuff. And I think one of the ways you differentiate yourself is by being a normal person, sadly, because there's a lot of people that really aren't.
Well, I agree. I think I've got a lot of good friends who started as clients.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but sometimes you just meet a client and you just click and you become mates, and that's a fantastic byproduct for me. And I don't think that will ever happen if you're turning up with I know what's right and you don't. You're in tell mode. You don't stand a chance.
No, it doesn't work. So what I really want to know is the people you dedicated the book to, so Arsene Wenger and Judi Dench and Paul McCartney, etc. Have any of them got in touch offering?
No, not a one. No,
well,
not a single one.
There's still time.
But the publisher said you need a dedication page, and I said, really? Do I have to? And I thought, I could have some fun with this.
I read yours and thought, I should have done something like that in mine. Maybe the next one.
Dedicate your book to people who've never heard of you. Great idea.
Yes. Did you send them a copy?
I did actually send the book to Mikel Arteta, the Arsenal manager, saying, look, you're clearly all over this topic of culture. You talk about it a lot. Maybe we should get together and have a cup of coffee and talk about it. Haven't heard back.
Nothing. Wow.
I mean, he's a busy boy, isn't he? I understand.
It's just rude. You haven't sent one to Judi Dench then? I feel like you should.
No.
It's been so much fun talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If people want to find out more about you and your work, where should they go to look?
Amazon, look for the book, Better Culture Faster. The website is innermostconsulting.com.
Amazing. Thank you, Andrew. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Change Stories podcast. I love this conversation and I hope you did too. Thanks as ever to my wonderful guests and to Pete Morgan at Monkey Pants Productions for making the podcast sound amazing. If you want to find out more about this or any other episodes of Change Stories, go to www.changestories.co.uk, where you will find all the episodes and show notes. If you have enjoyed listening, please rate and review the Change Stories podcast on your podcast listening platform. And do please let me know if you have ideas or requests for future episodes. You can contact me and find out more about change and storytelling on my website, www.feldsparconsulting.com. Thanks again for joining in with the Change Stories conversation.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.